The air inside the house felt heavier than usual, like an unseen weight pressing against the walls. It had been a long day, and Olivia was just beginning to settle in for the evening, tucking her 5-year-old daughter, Emma, into bed. The warm glow of the bedside lamp flickered softly, casting gentle shadows as Olivia stroked her daughter's hair, whispering the same bedtime story she always did. Everything seemed normal, ordinary even. But beneath the surface, a storm was brewing, one she didn't even realize had already begun. When she finally stepped out of Emma's room and closed the door with a soft click, she let out a sigh of exhaustion. That's when she noticed it. Her phone, sitting face down on the kitchen counter, was buzzing over and over, an unusual number of notifications flooding in. A sinking feeling crept up her spine as she reached for it, her fingers hesitating just for a second before flipping it over. The screen lit up with a string of missed calls and unread messages. Some were from friends, others from numbers she didn't recognize, but they all carried the same ominous undertone. "Olivia, have you seen this? Call me right now. What's going on?" Her heart pounded as she clicked on the first message, and then the second, each one sending an icy chill through her veins. Her hands grew unsteady as she followed one of the links sent to her. Her breath caught the moment she saw it. There she was. Her. The image on the screen was unmistakable. It was a photo of Olivia, taken without her knowledge, in a place she never should have been. A place she had promised herself she'd never return to. But it wasn't just the picture that made her stomach drop. It was the caption beneath it, the words that cut through her like a blade, exposing a truth she had fought so hard to bury. And worse, this wasn't just some private message. This was out there, spreading fast, being seen by people she never wanted to know. The secret she had spent years protecting had just been ripped open for the world to see. Olivia's breath grew shallow as she scrolled, her pulse hammering against her ribs. Who had done this? And how had they found out? The walls of her quiet home suddenly felt suffocating, the air thick with panic. She turned toward the darkened hallway, where Emma lay sleeping peacefully, completely unaware that everything was about to change. Then, just as she was about to lock her phone and compose herself, a new message appeared at the top of the screen. This one was different. It wasn't a question. It wasn't concerned. It was a warning. And as Olivia read the chilling words, she knew this wasn't over. In fact, it was only the beginning. Olivia's fingers hovered over the screen, her eyes locked on the message that had just appeared. "We need to talk. Now?" There was no name, no number, just a cold, anonymous warning staring back at her. A chill ran through her as she swallowed the lump in her throat, her mind racing through every possible explanation. This couldn't be happening. Not now. Not after everything she had done to move on, to keep her past exactly where it belonged, buried. With a trembling hand, she set her phone down and forced herself to take a deep breath. She needed to think. But how could she, when every second that passed felt like the walls were closing in? She glanced at the clock on the wall, the minutes ticking away in eerie silence. Somewhere down the hall, Emma stirred in her sleep, a quiet reminder that no matter what was happening, she had to stay calm. She had to be strong. She ran through the past few weeks in her mind, searching for anything that might explain how she had ended up here. Life had been normal, or at least as normal as it could be. The days were filled with school drop-offs, work calls, grocery runs, routine, predictable, safe. There was nothing unusual. No sudden encounters, no strange phone calls, no reason to believe that anyone had been watching. And yet, that picture, it wasn't old. It wasn't some relic from her past resurfacing at the worst possible time. It was recent. The details were unmistakable, the way her hair was pulled back, the jacket she had been wearing, even the dim, flickering neon light in the background. She knew exactly where that photo had been taken, and the realization made her stomach turn. 3 nights ago, She had barely even thought about it since then. It had been a moment of weakness, a decision she regretted the second she had made it. The kind of mistake she had promised herself she would never make again. That night, after putting Emma to bed, she had gone out just for a drive, she told herself. Just to clear her head. But she had ended up somewhere she had no business being, outside a place she had sworn to avoid. A place tied to a life she had worked so hard to escape. She hadn't stayed long, just enough to remind herself why she had walked away in the first place. And then she had left, convinced it was behind her. But someone had seen. Someone had followed. And now, someone was making sure she knew. Her heart pounded as she tried to piece it all together. Who would do this? Who would want to expose her? The obvious answer was staring her in the face, someone from her past. But that wasn't good enough. She needed more. She thought of Mark, her. Her mind raced back to that night, trying to remember every detail. Had she seen anyone watching her? A car parked too long in the shadows. A stranger's lingering gaze. Nothing stood out, but that didn't mean she hadn't been followed. Panic clawed at her chest as she paced the kitchen, her thoughts spiraling. Then she remembered Mark. He had called her that night, right after she had left. She hadn't answered. She hadn't wanted to. Their conversations had grown strained lately, his patience wearing thin with the boundaries she had put up. "You're still hiding something, Olivia," he had said just a week ago, his voice carrying a quiet accusation. "I can feel it." Was it possible he had something to do with this? She wanted to believe he wouldn't go that far, but trust had never come easy to her, not with him, not with anyone. Before she could convince herself to call him, a sudden noise jolted her back to the present. A sharp thud outside, near the driveway. Olivia's breath caught as she stood frozen, listening. The wind hummed against the windows, the world outside cloaked in darkness. Slowly, she moved toward the front door, pressing her palm against the wood as she peered through the peephole. Nothing. Just the empty street, bathed in the pale glow of the streetlights. But something felt off. She unlocked the door with careful, quiet movements and stepped outside. The air was cold, the night eerily still. Then she saw it. Her mailbox was open, the lid hanging slightly ajar, a single envelope resting inside. Her pulse pounded as she reached for it, fingers trembling. No return address, no markings, just her name scrawled in uneven handwriting across the front. She hesitated before tearing it open, her stomach twisting as she unfolded the paper inside. The message was short, just 3 words written in thick, black ink. "Stop looking. Now?" Olivia's breath hitched, her eyes darting around the empty street. Someone was trying to scare her. Someone was watching her. She hurried back inside, locking the door behind her, her fingers gripping the envelope so tightly that the paper crumpled. This wasn't just about a photo anymore. It was a warning. Determined to stay in control, she grabbed her phone and scrolled back to the message with the picture. She needed proof, something to hold on to, something to figure out who was behind this. But as she opened the chat, a cold wave of dread washed over her. The message was gone. Not just the link, but the entire conversation. Erased. Vanished. Like it had never been sent at all. Her hands shook as she stared at the blank screen, her mind grasping for an explanation. This wasn't just someone exposing her. It was someone powerful enough to erase their tracks. Someone who didn't just want her to know they were watching, but who wanted her to know she was powerless to stop it. And then, just as she thought she had reached the peak of her fear, her phone buzzed again. Another message. This one even more chilling than the last. "You should have left it alone, Olivia. Now, it's too late." This ending raises the stakes and deepens the mystery, making the audience eager to find out who's behind it all. Let me know if you'd like me to add more twists. Olivia's entire body stiffened as she read the message, the words blurring in her vision as a sickening sense of dread settled in her stomach. Now, it's too late. Too late for what? She wanted to believe this was just another scare tactic, another cruel attempt to rattle her, but something about it felt different. Final. She barely had time to process it before her phone vibrated again. Another message. But this time, it wasn't from the anonymous sender. It was from Claire. Olivia's heart pounded at the sight of her best friend's name flashing across the screen. Claire was one of the few people Olivia still trusted, one of the only ones who had stood by her when she had walked away from everything years ago. But when she opened the message, a fresh wave of panic hit her. "Olivia, what the hell is going on? Someone just sent me a picture of you. Call me NOW." Her breath caught in her throat. Claire wasn't supposed to be involved in this. She wasn't part of that world, that past. Whoever was behind this wasn't just targeting Olivia anymore. They were widening their reach, pulling in the people closest to her. Fumbling with her phone, she quickly dialed Claire's number, her hands slick with sweat. The call barely rang once before Claire answered, her voice sharp, frantic. "Olivia, tell me what's happening," she demanded, no pretense of small talk. "I just got a text from a blocked number. It was a picture of you, and it looked like it was taken in the last few days." And the message, she hesitated, her voice dropping. "It said you're asking the wrong questions." "What does that mean? What the hell did you get yourself into?" Olivia pressed a hand to her forehead, closing her eyes. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought it was just me. I didn't think they'd go after anyone else." "They?" Claire pressed, her tone laced with concern. "Who is they? Does this have something to do with—" She trailed off, but Olivia knew exactly what she was implying. The past. The thing Olivia had worked so hard to bury, the reason she had severed ties, started over, tried to become someone new. If it was resurfacing now, if someone had found a way to dig it back up, that meant they knew exactly what to use against her. And if Claire was receiving threats too, that meant Olivia wasn't the only one in danger. She exhaled shakily, forcing herself to think. "Can you send me the picture?" she asked, bracing herself for what she might see. Claire hesitated. "I would. But it's gone. It disappeared right after I read the message." Olivia's blood ran cold. The same thing had happened to her. Someone was controlling the narrative, feeding her just enough information to make her paranoid before snatching it away, leaving her with nothing to prove any of it was real. Then another thought struck her. If Claire had been pulled into this, who else had? Was she the only one, or was this spreading further? Her mind immediately went to Mark. He had been persistent lately, asking too many questions, pushing too hard. What if he had seen something? What if he knew something? And if he did, what would that mean for him? For her? A sudden sharp knock at the front door made Olivia flinch, her heart leaping to her throat. It was too late for visitors. She gripped her phone tighter. "Claire, someone's here," she whispered. There was a brief pause. "Are you expecting anyone?" "No." Olivia took a slow step toward the door, every muscle in her body tense. The knock came again, louder this time. Whoever it was, they weren't leaving. Her phone buzzed in her other hand, a new message appearing just as she reached for the doorknob. "Whatever you do, don't open it." Olivia's breath hitched as she stared at the message, her pulse hammering in her ears. "Whatever you do, don't open it." The words felt like ice crawling down her spine. She stood frozen, her fingers hovering over the deadbolt as another sharp knock echoed through the house. Whoever was on the other side wasn't just waiting, they were demanding. She glanced over her shoulder toward the hallway, where Emma slept soundly, oblivious to the growing danger just beyond their front door. Every instinct in her body screamed for her to listen to the warning, but she couldn't ignore the gnawing question in the back of her mind. What if it's someone who needs help? What if it's Claire? But Claire would have called. Anyone she trusted would have. This wasn't right. Slowly, she backed away from the door, gripping her phone so tightly her knuckles turned white. She turned off the lights, swallowing hard as she crept toward the window, careful to stay low. With a slow, measured movement, she peeled back the curtain just enough to see outside. Her heart nearly stopped. A dark figure stood just beyond the porch light's reach, their face obscured in the shadows. They weren't moving, just standing there waiting, watching. A fresh wave of fear crashed over her as she stumbled back, her breath coming in short, ragged gasps. This isn't just a warning anymore. This is real. Her phone buzzed again, and she flinched before looking at the screen. Another message. "You should have listened." A shudder ran through her as a sudden realization dawned on her. This wasn't just about the past. This wasn't someone trying to unearth old mistakes or settle an old score. This was bigger, more dangerous, and whoever they were, they had no intention of stopping. A noise from outside made her whip her head around. The sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate, moving away from the door. Whoever had been there was leaving. But where were they going? She held her breath, listening. Then, just as suddenly as they had arrived, silence. But Olivia knew better than to believe they were truly gone. She wasn't safe, not here, not anymore. Her first thought was to grab Emma and leave. But where would they go? Who could she trust? Claire was already caught in the web, and Mark, she wasn't sure if he was a suspect or a savior. She needed answers, but more than that, she needed a plan. And then, as if the night hadn't twisted enough, her phone rang. Not a text, this time a call. A blocked number. She hesitated, her heart hammering in her chest, before pressing answer and slowly raising the phone to her ear. For a moment, there was nothing. Just the sound of her own shaky breathing. Then, finally, a voice. A whisper, low and deliberate. "You're running out of time, Olivia." And then, the line went dead. Olivia stood there, the phone still pressed to her ear, long after the line had gone dead. "You're running out of time." The words coiled around her like a noose, tightening with each passing second. She wanted to believe this was some elaborate scare tactic, a sick game meant to unnerve her, but she knew better. This wasn't random. It wasn't just about her mistakes, or even about someone wanting revenge. There was a bigger piece to the puzzle she was missing, something lurking beneath the surface that she hadn't yet uncovered. And now, someone was making sure she never did. Just as she was about to move, her phone vibrated again. But this time, it wasn't a message. It was a video. The sender was anonymous, the file already downloaded onto her device, like it had been waiting for her. Dread coiled in her stomach as she hesitated, her thumb hovering over the screen. Everything inside her screamed, "Don't open it," but she had no choice. She pressed play. The footage was grainy, security camera quality, the angle slightly tilted, as if whoever had recorded it hadn't meant for it to be found. At first, it was nothing, just a dimly lit parking lot, empty except for a single car idling under a flickering street lamp. Olivia's breath caught as she recognized it immediately. Her car. The same night she had gone to that place, the place she had sworn she wouldn't return to. Her pulse hammered as she watched herself step out, glancing around as if checking to make sure no one had followed her. But then, something changed. The camera angle shifted slightly, and a second figure stepped into the frame. Olivia's blood ran cold. It wasn't just her in the parking lot that night. Someone else had been there. A man. Tall, broad-shouldered, his face obscured by the poor lighting. He moved toward her, speaking low, his body language urgent. She watched herself hesitate before handing him something small, barely visible in the low-resolution footage. And then, just as suddenly as he appeared, he turned and disappeared into the darkness. Olivia's head swam as she struggled to make sense of what she was seeing. She hadn't been alone that night. But why couldn't she remember this? She played the video again, forcing herself to focus, searching for anything that would help her piece it together. And then it hit her. The way the man moved, the way he leaned in slightly, almost protectively, it was Mark. A rush of nausea hit her as reality shifted beneath her feet. No, that can't be right. Mark had been asking questions, pushing for answers, but he had never mentioned this. He had acted like he didn't know what had happened that night. He had let her believe she was the only one who had gone there. But he had lied. A fresh wave of fear gripped her as another realization sank in. If Mark had been there that night, that meant he had been keeping secrets too. Secrets he hadn't wanted her to uncover. And if someone was sending her this footage now, it wasn't just to warn her. It was to show her something she had missed all along. She wasn't just being watched. She was being played. Her thoughts spiraled, every assumption she had made about the past few weeks crumbling. She needed to find Mark. Now. But before she could even take a step, her phone buzzed one more time. Another message. 3 simple words, but this time they weren't a warning. Check your basement. The air left her lungs in a rush as every hair on her body stood on end. The basement. The one place in her house she never went. The one place where something or someone could be waiting. And suddenly, she realized she was no longer sure she was alone. Olivia's breath came in shallow, uneven gasps as she stared at the message on her phone. Check your basement. The words pulsed on the screen, a silent command that sent ice through her veins. Every rational part of her mind screamed to ignore it, to grab Emma, run, and never look back. But she knew that wasn't an option. Not anymore. Whoever was doing this wasn't just trying to scare her. They were controlling the game, pulling her deeper, forcing her to make a move. And she couldn't afford to be a pawn any longer. Her hands shook as she set the phone down, her eyes darting toward the hallway where Emma was still fast asleep. The weight of responsibility crashed over her, suffocating in its intensity. If she made the wrong choice, if she underestimated the danger circling them, she wouldn't be the only one to pay for it. But if she did nothing, if she turned her back on the truth now, she would never escape it. It would chase her, consume her, until there was nothing left but regret. Steeling herself, she forced her legs to move, her steps slow and deliberate as she made her way toward the basement door. The air felt thicker the closer she got, like the house itself was holding its breath. She hesitated at the threshold, fingers trembling as she reached for the doorknob. The silence pressed in, heavy and suffocating, her pulse thudding in her ears. She swallowed hard and turned the handle. The door creaked open, revealing a yawning darkness that seemed to stretch forever. She reached for the light switch and flicked it on. The single bulb at the bottom of the stairs flickered before humming to life, casting long, distorted shadows across the unfinished cement floor. The basement was exactly as she had left its storage boxes stacked against the walls, old furniture draped in white sheets, dust settling in the undisturbed air. But something felt wrong. It wasn't the way things looked. It was the way they felt, like she wasn't alone. She took a hesitant step down, her bare feet pressing against the cold wood of the stairs. Another step, then another. With each movement, dread twisted in her gut, a voice in the back of her mind screaming for her to turn around. But she couldn't. She had to know. And then she saw it. A single box, different from the rest, pushed slightly away from the wall, as if someone had moved it recently. Her throat tightened as she crouched down, her hands unsteady as she reached for the lid. Slowly, carefully, she pulled it open. Inside, buried beneath layers of old clothes and forgotten junk, was something that didn't belong. A file. Thick, worn at the edges, filled with papers that had been stuffed inside carelessly. Olivia's fingers hovered over it before finally pulling it free, her pulse hammering as she flipped it open. And that's when the world tilted beneath her. Inside were pages of records, printed emails, surveillance photos of her, of Claire, of Mark. Pictures of her from years ago, grainy shots taken from a distance. Some from recent weeks. Some from nights she hadn't even realized she was being watched. But it was the last page that made the room spin. A document, old but intact. A birth certificate. But not hers. Emma's. And under the section where the father's name should have been, a single name was typed in bold letters. Not Mark's. Someone else's. Someone she hadn't thought about in years. Someone she had believed was gone. Her stomach twisted as she staggered back, her grip on the papers tightening. This wasn't just about her mistakes, about someone dragging up her past to punish her. It was about Emma. And whoever had been pulling the strings had known the truth all along. Before she could process it, her phone buzzed again, vibrating violently against the floor where she had dropped it. Another message, stark against the screen. Now you understand. You have one chance. The truth or your daughter. Choose. A choked breath left her lips as her knees threatened to buckle. The choice wasn't impossible. It was unthinkable. Olivia's hands trembled as she clutched the birth certificate, her mind spinning in a storm of confusion and panic. This isn't possible. This isn't real. But the paper in her grip told a different story. The truth had been hiding in plain sight, buried under years of half-memories and unspoken fears. Someone had known they had always known. And now, they were making her choose. The room felt suffocating as she scrambled back from the box, her heartbeat pounding so loudly it drowned out every rational thought. Emma. She had to get to Emma. Whoever was behind this, whatever they wanted, they had already proven how deep their reach went. There was no time to waste. She turned and bolted up the stairs, taking them two at a time, the file still clenched in her shaking hands. But just as she reached the top and rounded the corner toward Emma's room, she stopped cold. The front door was open. Not wide, but just enough. Just enough for someone to have entered or left. A shiver raced down her spine as she forced herself to move forward, every step agonizingly slow. Emma? Her voice cracked, barely above a whisper, as she reached for the doorknob to her daughter's room. It was slightly ajar, just as she had left it. She pushed it open fully, her stomach twisting with dread. The bed was empty. The covers were pulled back, the small shape that should have been there gone. The air in the room was too still, too heavy, and a primal fear clawed up her throat. No, Emma. She rushed forward, her hands shaking as she ripped the closet door open. Empty. She spun, scanning the room, searching for any sign, anything that told her where her daughter had gone. Then she saw it. Her phone, still in her hand, lit up with another message. You were too slow. A choked sob caught in her throat as she felt her knees buckle, but she couldn't fall apart. Not now. Not when Emma was out there. Not when someone had taken her. Her fingers flew over her screen as she tried calling Mark, desperation overriding every ounce of doubt she'd had about him before. The phone rang once, twice, and then, to her horror, she heard the vibration not through the speaker, but from inside the house. Her head whipped around, scanning the room as her pulse pounded in her ears. The sound was coming from the hallway, from his jacket. Mark's jacket, slung over the back of a chair, his phone resting in the pocket, like he had just left it there. Like he had never actually left. A sharp wave of nausea rolled through her. He had been here. The entire time. Then, before she could move, a floorboard creaked behind her. She barely had time to turn before an arm wrapped around her, locking around her waist like steel. A hand clamped over her mouth as a voice low, familiar, betraying whispered in her ear. You were never supposed to find out. Her entire world shattered in an instant. Mark. This twist pushes the story into full-blown crisis mode, making the audience question everything they thought they knew. Let me know if you want it taken even further. Olivia's body twisted violently as she fought against Mark's grip, her mind reeling from the sheer impossibility of it all. The man she had trusted, the man who had stood by her, searching for answers alongside her, he had been playing her from the very beginning. Every missing piece, every question she had wrestled with, now had only one answer. It was always him. She thrashed against his hold, her muffled screams swallowed by the hand clamped over her mouth. "Stop fighting, Olivia," Mark hissed, his breath hot against her ear. His voice was eerily calm, as if he had been expecting this moment, as if it had all been inevitable. "You should have listened. You should have stopped looking." With every ounce of strength she had, Olivia stomped her heel down on his foot and threw her head back, catching him just below the chin. His grip faltered for a split second, just enough. She wrenched free, spinning to face him, her breath coming in ragged, desperate gasps. "Where is she?" she demanded, her voice shaking. "Where is Emma?" Mark's expression twisted into something unreadable, something colder than she had ever seen. "She's safe," he said, but the words felt like poison in the air. For now, Olivia's heart pounded so violently she thought she might collapse under the weight of it. "Why?" The question tore from her throat, raw with emotion. "Why would you do this? Why would you?" But then it hit her, the truth slamming into her with crushing force. It was never about me. The birth certificate, the surveillance, the threats. They weren't just about punishing Olivia for something in her past. They were about Emma. Mark had known something Olivia hadn't, who Emma really was. And whoever had been pulling the strings, whoever had been watching from the shadows, had been waiting for the moment Olivia would finally uncover the truth. Mark's lips pressed into a thin line, his jaw tightening. "I tried to protect you," he said, his voice low. "I tried to keep you from finding out. But you wouldn't stop. You kept pushing," and now he exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "Now you don't get a choice anymore." A sound barely there echoed from the hallway. A footstep. Olivia's stomach dropped. They weren't alone. And then, before she could react, another figure emerged from the darkness. A man, tall, broad-shouldered. His presence sent a bolt of pure terror through her veins. She knew him, not from recent memories, but from a time she had tried to forget. The face from her past, the name on Emma's birth certificate, the father Olivia had thought was dead. "Hello, Olivia?" he said, his voice smooth, controlled. "It's been a long time." Her body went cold, her breath catching in her throat. The pieces locked into place in an instant. This wasn't just about revenge. It wasn't just about exposing a secret. It was about taking back what was his. "Emma." "No," Olivia whispered, shaking her head as she backed away. "You can't have her." A slow, calculated smile spread across his face. "She was never yours to keep." Everything around her blurred, the walls closing in as reality twisted into something unrecognizable. It had never been about exposing Olivia's past. It had been about rewriting Emma's future. And unless Olivia fought back with everything she had left, she was going to lose her daughter forever. She lunged. Time blurred into fragments of movement, desperate, violent, unrelenting. Olivia fought like she had never fought before, clawing, striking, doing whatever it took to break free. The room erupted into chaos, shadows twisting, bodies colliding, and somewhere in the madness, she heard the sharp crack of wood splintering against flesh, a cry of pain, the dull thud of a body hitting the floor, and then silence. Her breath came in ragged gasps as she staggered back, her hands trembling, her mind barely catching up to what had just happened. Mark was unconscious, blood seeping from a wound at his temple where she had struck him with the heavy glass lamp from the nightstand. But the other man, Emma's real father, was nowhere to be seen. The front door stood open, swinging slightly from the force of his escape. He was gone. Fear pulsed through her veins, but there was no time to dwell on it. She turned on her heel, bolting down the hallway, her voice hoarse and raw as she called out, "Emma! Emma, where are you?" The house felt suffocating, the walls pressing in, but then a sound. A soft, muffled sob. Olivia's heart nearly shattered as she rushed toward the closet in the guest room, throwing open the door. And there she was. Emma sat curled in the corner, her little arms wrapped tightly around her knees, her wide, tear-filled eyes locking onto Olivia's face. The moment their gazes met, Emma launched forward, burying herself against her mother's chest, her small body shaking uncontrollably. Olivia held her so tightly she thought she might never let go, her own tears slipping down her cheeks as she whispered over and over, "I've got you, baby. You're safe now." But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't entirely true. Not yet. The police arrived minutes later, the wail of sirens slicing through the thick night air. Mark was hauled away, barely conscious, his face slack with defeat. Olivia told them everything she knew, everything she had pieced together in those last harrowing moments. But when she mentioned him, the man who had orchestrated it all, the man who had vanished into the night, there was nothing. No trace. No leads. Just an empty doorway and a name that sent chills through her soul. Days passed in a blur of statements, investigations, and unanswered questions. And through it all, Olivia remained on edge, every shadow a threat, every knock at the door a potential nightmare waiting to unfold. The police assured her they were looking for him, that it was only a matter of time before he was found. But Olivia knew better. A man like that, a ghost from her past, someone with enough power and resources to orchestrate something this elaborate, he wouldn't be caught unless he wanted to be. And that was what haunted her most. Weeks later, with Mark behind bars and her life seemingly returning to normal, Olivia still felt the weight of something unfinished, something lurking just beyond the surface. She watched Emma closer, held her tighter, never letting her out of sight for too long. The nightmares hadn't stopped, not for Olivia, not for Emma. They both woke in the middle of the night sometimes, shaken by dreams of dark figures and whispered threats. And every so often, Olivia swore she felt eyes on her, even when she was alone. Then one evening, as she was locking up the house, her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. A simple, nameless message flashed across the screen. "You may have won this time, but a father never forgets." A cold dread curled in her stomach. She turned toward the window, looking out into the darkness beyond the glass, searching. But there was nothing there. Only the stillness of the night. For now,